Young waitress exposes incredible truth. Billionaire shocked to find father's photo in his wallet. Megan stood at the counter of the bustling diner, the smell of frying bacon and brewing coffee enveloping her. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped down the table, thoughts of end-of-month bills pressuring her chest like a vice. The clinking of silverware and chatter around her faded into a murmur as her heart raced at the prospect of yet another daunting shift. She stole a glance at her mother's old car out the window, a stark reminder of the weight she carried, like a weary backpack full of regrets and aspirations. She wanted more, craved more than the endless cycle of late nights and early mornings just to make ends meet. She dreamt of being the first to attend college in her family, slipping free from the chains of poverty. If only someone could see her. Then disaster struck. As she poured coffee into a mug at the counter, her nerves betrayed her, and the steaming liquid splattered onto a sharply dressed man, his tailored suit starkly contrasting with the greasy environment. "What the hell?" the billionaire exclaimed, eyes narrowing as the coffee dripped down the fabric, an unmistakable stain born from a careless moment. The tension in the small diner thickened, the other patrons cutting glances between the two. Megan's face flushed with embarrassment, heart hammering as she stammered out apologies. "I'm so sorry, I didn't—" But as she fumbled to explain, something shifted between them. Her voice poured forth, unraveling a narrative of grit and sacrifice, tales of her mother's struggles working double shifts just to keep the lights on. The man, now studying her with softened eyes, seemed taken aback by her resilience and the ferocity burning within her. "Who are you?" he whispered, almost to himself, like he discovered a secret treasure hidden in this hollow diner. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Over the next few days, he returned, Thomas, with his ruffled hair and expressive eyes, the billionaire who made her heart flutter and her stomach twist with anxiety. Their conversations were electric, held against the din of clattering plates. Yet, the deeper they delved into their lives, the more the gulf between their worlds loomed large. Each shared laugh or lingering look felt tantalizing, yet her heart ached knowing his family's company, an emblem of wealth and power, had cruelly impacted her mother's job security.
Each word from him echoed with privilege, igniting a conflicted fire within her. A skepticism crept in, her emotions warred fiercely, their iron grip squeezing tightly. Could she really entertain something with him, a fortune-bearer? Her pulse raced in anguish, knowing how their fates intertwined beneath the surface. She hesitated, fighting back a swell of nausea. What would her mother say? Wouldn't pursuing this relationship betray her roots, fire back at the struggles of those who came before her? Then, in a moment that would change everything, Thomas rummaged through his wallet one day, revealing an old photograph of a man she recognized from childhood, a shadow cast far too long over her family. Feelings of dread coiled around her. Here before her stood two paths, overlapping but divergent. She felt torn as their eyes met, an unspoken understanding rippling through the diner, a crossroads, heavy with consequences. With their futures hanging in the balance, she couldn't shake the looming question that filled the charged air. Could love and integrity coexist in a world meant to keep them apart? Megan held her breath, heart racing, as silence thickened and the neon lights flickered above, like stars inches away from colliding. Megan felt the weight of the world shift precariously on her shoulders. The photograph lingered between them, a silent witness to the tangled roots of their histories. Thomas's eyes searched hers, a mix of confusion and curiosity mingling with something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken with an urgency she hadn't anticipated. She inhaled sharply, understanding washed over her with the force of a tide. She had seen that man in photographs, stories whispered in the shadows of her childhood. What is this?" Megan managed, her voice tremulous as she gestured toward the photo resting in his palm. Every instinct told her to withdraw, to flee from this painful intersection of her past and his present, but an eerie sense of determination took hold. This was her moment, not just to react, but to confront. Thomas swallowed hard as he processed her recognition. "This man is my father," he replied, his tone shifting to a mix of nostalgia and regret. "I didn't know he had affected anyone like your family." The admission cracked something open inside Megan. The warmth she felt in his presence began to dim against the backdrop of shared hurt and betrayal. Did he really grasp the ramifications of his family's legacy? As the silence thickened, her mind raced. Who was Thomas in this drama? A player or an unwitting victim? Could she afford to grow closer to him when their family histories bore the imprint of conflict? Her heart wrestled with the animosity aimed at a name that had haunted her mother's dreams, but as she looked closer into Thomas's blue eyes, vulnerable, searching for answers, she felt a flicker of empathy soften her resolve. It erupted against her careful calculus, urging her to confront this damning truth.
Vulnerability coursed through the diner, and Megan seized it. "Your family's business put my mother out of work," she breathed softly, anger mixing with heartache. "You don't know the sacrifices we've made." "Share with me," he implored, stepping closer, eyes glistening with a determination that urged her to continue. "I want to understand." Her heart thudded against the confines of her chest. A million conflicting thoughts commandeered her focus, her family's struggles, her mother's perseverance, and now the possibility of connecting with Thomas, a man tied to everything she had despised. She felt raw and exposed, yet at that moment she realized that honesty might be her only weapon against unnecessary division. "Every day I see my mother work herself to the bone," she began, her voice steadier. "She sacrificed everything for me, her dreams, her happiness, all for a little bit of stability. Your family's company, it stripped that away from her." Each word peeled back layers of her emotional barrier, revealing not just pain, but unyielding strength. Thomas nodded, his expression shifting as if he were absorbing each anguished syllable. "I had no idea. It's not right." "And it's not just about you," she interrupted, heart hammering in her chest as she felt the transformative power of her voice rising. "It's about all of us who suffered because of decisions made behind closed doors." A daring fire ignited inside her, stealing her resolve. For years, she had been silenced by fear, weighed down by stature and money. No longer. As their conversation unfolded, shifting from uncertainty to intimacy, Megan's perspective began to shift. Could they transcend the mistakes of the past, charting a new course rooted in understanding rather than bitterness? The diner hummed with its usual energy, but for Megan, the world had narrowed, isolating their conversation from the background chaos. This was not merely about revelations, but transformations. They both stood at a precipice, ready to rewrite their narratives. But as the moment deepened, the door to the diner swung open with a sudden force. The arrival of new patrons muffled their intimate exchange, throwing chaos into their budding connection. In that instant, Megan realized she must confront not just Thomas and his legacy, but also the external forces around them, potential backlash from others who would not understand their bond. "Are you ready for this?" Thomas asked, his voice low yet insistent, as the challenges ahead loomed like thunderclouds on the horizon. Megan looked into his eyes, aware that stepping forward meant embracing the unknown. She took a deep breath, her heart a mix of hope and trepidation. "The time has come to face the consequences of our choices," she whispered, resolve crystallizing within her. With that unspoken promise hanging heavy between them, Megan felt the path clear. But can love truly defy the shadows of their past, or was she merely setting herself up for another heartbreak?
She took a step back, glancing at the doorway, the new patrons stumbling forth, neglecting the turbulence behind them, portents of what might come next. As their gaze collided once more, it was clear they had begun a dialogue fraught with risk, one that would either build a bridge or deepen the chasm between their worlds. And the question still lay heavy in the air. What were they truly willing to sacrifice to pursue the love they found amidst the ruins? Megan's heart raced as the noise of the diner enveloped them once more, scattering the delicate threads of their conversation. Internal alarm bells clamored. The tension had shifted palpably, and she sensed the gaze of strangers sweeping over them. Her surroundings blurred, overshadowed by the raw emotion pulsing between her and Thomas. "Maybe we should go somewhere private," she suggested, her voice losing its earlier steadiness. The urgency felt imperative. It was essential to protect this budding connection from judgment, from misunderstanding. Yet the suggestion also echoed an underlying fear. How could she truly seek solace when the world around them had always conspired against unions like theirs? Thomas tilted his head slightly, intrigued yet cautious. "You're right, this isn't the ideal place to dive deeper into our family histories." He momentarily glanced around, tension visible in the way he confined his gaze to her alone.
I'll drive us to that little park nearby. It's quiet. Okay, she agreed, but reluctance gnawed at her. Was it really wise to push forward with him? The burdens they carried loomed in her mind, shadows that threatened to consume whatever they might build together. But something about the vulnerability of their last exchange urged her onward. They were bound by something greater than their pasts, a shared desire to unfold truths tucked away for too long. Stepping into the quiet of the park felt like crossing a threshold into a different realm. The greenery enveloped them in an intimacy that the clanging plates and casual banter of the diner could never offer. Megan settled onto a wooden bench, her instincts heightening as she regarded Thomas, a man unmoored by the revelations of their shared lineage. "Tell me," he began, voice softer now, "what did your mother sacrifice for you? I want to understand all the layers, the real impact." There was an earnestness in his approach that struck Megan. He was not here simply to defend his family's name, but to acknowledge the spaces where pain lingered. It felt cathartic to open up, unspooling the decades woven with unspoken hurt. "She was once a talented artist," Megan began, finding joy in her craft. "But when your family's company expanded, taking over local businesses, her gallery, her dreams disappeared." She paused, feeling a swell of emotion. She had to settle for a job she despised to keep food on the table. As she spoke, Thomas's face hardened with realization.
He absorbed her words, processing not only her pain, but the broader implications of his family's past actions. "I didn't know it reached this deep. I'm sorry," he murmured, but it was clear that mere apologies wouldn't suffice to bridge their gulf. "I know it's not your fault," she replied, but the words felt half-hearted against the magnitude of their history. "However, I need you to understand, this is not just me telling you about my mother. It's about showing you the consequences of choices that were made without considering the people affected by them." His brow furrowed with renewed intent. "Then tell me how I can use my position to help. I want to be different from my father, to make things right, or at least better." Megan felt shaken by his pledge. How could she possibly harbor any hope for change? Yet areas of her heart started to soften. Perhaps the walls she had built were not as impenetrable as she once believed. They often say healing begins with honesty, and here she was, risking vulnerability again. "What if you can't?" she countered, the immediacy of his declarations striking her with a mix of fear and spark. "What if the legacy of your family is too entrenched for you to break free?" "I'll fight it," he asserted, firmness now igniting his voice. "Whether you believe me or not, I want to change my narrative, but you have to help me understand how." In that moment, a flicker of possibility ignited within her. It was a daring idea. Could she really accept the role of partner in his transformation? It felt reckless yet intoxicating, a chance at something greater than the sum of their fears. But doubts tightened their grip around her heart. What sacrifices would she need to make to follow this new path? How much of herself would she risk in this burgeoning relationship? As they faced each other across that bench, an unassuming piece of wood now serving as the battleground for their conflicting legacies, Megan sensed that decisions lay ahead, each one leading to crossroads. The pendulum of fate swung ominously between them, and as they sat enveloped by the intensity of the moment, she could not escape the nagging realization that their journey had only just begun. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, heart thundering anew. With resolve illuminating his features, he nodded, more than ever. But as they both taken a deep breath, the silence of the park amplified an undeniable truth. They were no longer just confronting their histories. They were stepping into a future that required them to dare greatly, and time was running short. Could they navigate the chaotic unknown, or would the past demand its reckoning? Megan's pulse raced in rhythm with the uncertainty that churned within her. The weight of their exchanged words hung thick in the air, imbued with an electric mixture of hope and trepidation. As she scanned the quiet park, her mind struggled to reconcile her growing attachments with the stark realities of their intertwined pasts.
"Perhaps my expectations are too high," she mused mentally, an internal dialogue rising against the emerging spark of connection. Could a mere promise of change be enough to dismantle years of disappointment? The question gnawed at her, its roots digging deeper into her psyche, entwining with her reluctant yearning for something genuine. "You know," she began, almost hesitantly, You could wind up losing everything you've worked for by trying to make right what your family has done. Her words bore an edge of caution, yet they trembled with a veil of vulnerability, laying bare her fears of the cost that might come with their choices. Thomas's expression shifted, revealing an unexpected light of determination hidden beneath his worry. Then maybe I'll redefine what it means to have something to lose. The conviction in his tone reverberated through Megan, stirring a mixture of admiration and doubt. He was challenging the very essence of his upbringing, yet she pondered the feasibility of such a daunting task. As Thomas spoke, she saw flickers of his own struggle, the conflict between familial loyalty and personal integrity harshly etched into his features. This wasn't just a facade. He struggled alongside her, fighting against the quiet shame of his heritage. It sparked an impulse within her, urging her to share her own vulnerabilities. "My mother had to be strong for both of us," she continued, tapping into the stories of resilience that had shaped her. She worked multiple low-paying jobs, all while battling her mental health. And yet, no matter the struggle, she'd cling to the idea that art brought joy. It was her lifeline. The emotion in her voice stirred something within her. Speaking about her mother wasn't just a recount of hardship. It was a hard-fought testament of perseverance. Thomas listened, his eyes reflecting an understanding colored by what he had fought to ignore for too long. The story she narrated carried the weight of choices that had shaped their realities, weaving a complex tapestry of a shared past and potential future. Understanding that pain, he replied, voice barely above a whisper, is the first step. Maybe that's how I can start changing things, after all. There was an intensity in his gaze that asked for her support, but also wrestled with his own demons. But even as their connection deepened, Megan could feel the urgency rising like an accelerating tide. It wasn't just their lives on the line, it was their futures, and how they might reshape legacies. The pause that fell between them vibrated with unventured possibilities, and yet a nagging fear crept in. Who am I to guide change? Megan pondered, her self-doubt surfacing as her heart clamored for belief. What if I lead you down the wrong path? What if my own past becomes a weight on your shoulders? Thomas reached out, placing a gentle but firm hand on hers.
The gesture was grounding yet invigorating, a shared moment of commitment punctuating the looming uncertainty. "We can face this together," he urged. "What happened can't be undone, but we can create a new narrative." His willingness to confront the past breathed faint optimism into her chest, the encased hope prompting her to envision a future free from the shackles of history. For the first time, she considered that perhaps they could cultivate a shared ideology, one grounded in honesty, empathy, and a collective aspiration for a different tomorrow. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, the golden hues cast an ethereal glow, illuminating their commitment, fragile yet blooming. It painted their resolve in something greater than shadows, conquering fears with the alluring promise of what could be. "Let's start a plan," she suggested, her tone gradually firming up. "We can decide what healing looks like for both of us, what actions we can take, not just for our families, but for ourselves." There it was, the palpable transition from mere conversation to action. What had once been an exploration of painful histories was now swelling with the fervent pursuit of agency. Each of them silently considering their next steps, plans began to form, yet an unvoiced acknowledgement lingered in the air. Change rarely comes without confrontation, and the past, it seemed, was not finished with them yet. Who would oppose their budding alliance? What shadows from their families would emerge to threaten their newfound resolve? The uncertainty lingered like a morning fog, pressing against their ambition, reminding them that every path toward healing would be paved with resistance. As they stood up from the bench, leaving behind a world of confessions, Megan could not shake the feeling that they were about to face something decidedly more perilous, a confrontation that would demand both their courage and conviction. "Can we really take on our families, Thomas?" she whispered into the dusk, her heart a storm of mixed hope and fear. In response, he squeezed her hand tightly, determination blazing in his eyes. "We don't have a choice. The time has come to face them." The air hung heavy with the scent of fresh earth as Megan and Thomas ambled away from the park, each step echoing the weight of their newfound commitments. The silence of the dusk wrapped around them like a blanket, yet the stillness stirred a tempest of thoughts within Megan.
She searched her mind for clarity amid the storm, questioning her role in this evolving narrative. What did it truly mean to support someone aiming to redefine their legacy? Was she prepared to face the realities that such a decision would unleash? Thomas began to direct them toward a coffee shop, a spot that had transformed into his sanctuary, where heated discussions took place against the backdrop of comforting caffeine aroma.
As they settled into a corner booth, she could see his resolve crystallizing amid the shadows under the dim lights. He busied himself with his phone, typing rapidly. The glow illuminating a face concocted a fierce determination and simmering anxiety. "What are you planning?" she asked, half excited, half nervous. "Research," he replied, eyes glued to the screen. "I want to know everything, every detail about my family's dealings that I can find. I can't counter what I don't understand completely." Megan felt a twinge of admiration. It was a calculated move, but one fraught with danger. Understanding often led to confrontation, and confrontation could lead to deeper wounds. What if his family retaliated against him for his pursuits? Would this knowledge simply serve to dig deeper into already festering familial conflicts? "Just be careful," she cautioned, and guilt swam in her chest, stinging her conscience for her protective tone. She wanted nothing more than to see him succeed, yet anxiety gnawed at her, whispering that this path could be riddled with betrayal. "I will," he assured her, though the light in his eyes hinted at a much deeper quest. Was it merely about rights and wrongs, or was this now intertwined with a quest for self-identity? Did he seek redemption, or was it approval he craved? They spent hours in the cafe, strategizing, and in between plans and coffee refills, Megan felt a bubbling excitement livening her spirit. It was more than just a plan. It was a tangible step towards something greater. Here was her opportunity to learn and grow, to reclaim her narrative alongside Thomas. But the clock on the wall chimed, pulling her back to the present. The hour was late, and the patrons had thinned. Tension began to seep back in as she realized that despite their proclamations of courage, the confrontation loomed. "Isn't it naive to think we can change what's ingrained in them?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What if they refuse to see? What if they see us as threats instead?" Thomas paused, his brow furrowing as he considered her words. "That's a risk we have to take," he replied softly. "But think about your mother. She fought hard to reclaim her joy and resilience against the odds. We need that same courage, don't we?" His description stirred something within her, and she felt a familiar pull of determination ignite inside, blending into a growing resolve. Could their drive for truth and the strength of shared histories shape a path forward? Would they be bound by the consequences of their families, or could they emerge free? The questions hung heavily in the air, but Megan knew the time had come to confront her fears. "Then we gather evidence. We prepare ourselves for what they might throw at us," she declared, the intent behind her words hardening her voice. As they left the shop, the cool night air felt invigorating against her skin.
Each step carried them closer to the decisions they needed to make, decisions that would not only define their futures, but carve a brave new narrative from the ashes of their pasts. But as they approached the crossroads between their families and their aspirations, dread washed over her. "What if they fight back?" she questioned, a tuck of panic seeping into her tone. Thomas nodded gravely, his expression reflecting the weight of reality they both faced. "Then we fight back harder." With every moment, the impending confrontation shadowed them, lifting the veil on a sobering truth. Change demanded not only courage, but a willingness to withstand the backlash of those who sought to protect the status quo. Megan's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through her veins as they stepped into the night. Tomorrow would bring their first act of defiance, their first revelation, not only against their pasts, but also against the very families that had tried to bind them. As she paused at the threshold of her door, the enormity of their undertaking loomed in her mind. Could they truly withstand the storm that was about to break? A shiver ran down her spine, both thrilling and petrifying, as she contemplated the battle ahead. "Are we really ready for this?" she murmured, hardly recognizing her own voice. "Yes," Thomas asserted, a fierce light in his gaze. "It's our time to rewrite the script." But at that moment, uncertainty twisted at the edges of her sense of purpose, and a foreboding thought lingered. What if their fight against the past
led them to unearth something darker than they had anticipated. Morning arrived with an unsettling clarity as sunlight pierced through the curtains, forcing Megan out of the refuge of sleep. Today would not only determine their immediate futures, but kickstart a pivotal shift in her life's trajectory. Her heart was still heavy with the weight of yesterday's revelations, yet beneath the apprehension flowed a newfound determination. Thomas's relentless pursuit of truth stirred something deep within her, an untapped reservoir of courage she had not known existed. As she brewed coffee, the rhythmic drip served as a metronome for her racing thoughts. She stared out the window, focusing on the neighborhood's mundanity. Each car that passed was a reminder of the world moving forward, while she stood on the precipice of a transformation. "What if this doesn't change anything?" she whispered to herself, the thought taking root in her mind as a palpable fear. What if their efforts were in vain, futile attempts against an unyielding backdrop of tradition and legacy? Doubt threatened to engulf her, but she quickly pushed it aside. Ignoring it wouldn't shield her from the confrontation they were about to face. "I can't back down," she murmured defiantly, lifting her chin. Her mother's spirit echoed within her, a testament to resilience that had weathered storms of its own.
Megan met Thomas at the coffee shop again, the familiar scent of roasted beans filling her with both comfort and trepidation. He was already deep in thought, scrolling through a series of documents on his tablet. The determination etched in his features was contagious, sparking a flame of resolve in her spirit as she approached him. "Are you ready?" she asked, a measure of confidence lacing her words that she wasn't sure she felt internally. "We gather what we can today, and then, well, we confront them all. It's time," Thomas replied, tension rippling through his words. As they settled into the booth, Megan took a breath, grounding herself. She felt an awareness of the stakes heightening around them. Their approach was veiled in uncertainty. The evidence they needed wouldn't simply emerge. It would unearth hidden truths, unveiling narratives dipped in darkness. "Tell me exactly what you found so far," she insisted, her eyes narrowing with focus. He relayed information in a steady cadence, outlining his family's dealings, detailing names and dates that twined together into a complicated tapestry of deceit. Each revelation pulled her further into the complexities of their legacy, solidifying her resolve to confront the consequences head-on. Yet with every piece of information revealed, an uncomfortable shiver crawled down her spine. "Are we sure we want to do this? They could retaliate, Thomas, and what if the backlash is worse than we imagined?" "I understand that fear, but we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to your mother." He countered intensely, as the fire in his eyes met the uncertainty reflected in hers. Her fingers drummed against the table, a manifestation of her tumultuous thoughts. She wasn't only supporting Thomas, she was entwined in this fight for her own identity, discovering the roots of her own strength in the process. "What if I break? What if they manage to shake me?" "Then we find a way to stand again," Thomas declared, pushing aside his own anxiety. The room pulsed with unspoken promises. They could not afford to falter. Today was their commitment to defy the repercussions of the past, carving a pathway defined by authenticity. They were ritualistically dismantling a structure built on lies, revealing truths that had long been buried. As they finished gathering information, their resolve solidified by the gravity of their mission, Megan felt a provocative tightness form within her. It was exhilarating and daunting, as anticipation swirled around her. "We have a plan. Now we just need to execute," Thomas said, his voice steady. But amid this growing confidence, a horrifying thought snaked through her mind. What if they uncovered something more? What if the truth was not only painful but destructive, ripping apart the last threads binding them to their families? As they stepped outside, determination surged within Megan, but uncertainty clung to her like a second skin.
"We may awaken the monsters lurking in the dark, Thomas. What if we can't bury them again?" Thomas held her gaze, the seriousness of their undertaking reflected back at her. "Then we face them together. We can't run from what needs to be unearthed." With every step forward, the tension between opportunity and trepidation grew thicker. She understood now. They were standing on the edge of two worlds, one steeped in family obligation, the other teeming with untapped potential. But as the door to freedom swung open, dark whispers taunted her. What lay behind?
With the confrontation looming and the troubling questions echoing in her mind, Megan's resolve was not merely tested, it was forged anew. What they would discover could irrevocably alter the very fabric of their lives. The moment of confrontation waited just ahead, and her heart raced. Are we truly prepared to face whatever emerges from this? Let's find out, Thomas answered, as they stepped into the uncertainty ahead. The air was thick with tension, crackling with both fear and anticipation. One powerful truth remained uncertain. Would they emerge standing, or would they be brought to their knees by the darkness they dared to confront? Megan felt a pulse of adrenaline course through her veins as they approached the towering glass building that housed the headquarters of Thomas's family legacy. Each step reverberated with the weight of the moment, the anticipation crackling around them like static electricity. They entered the lobby, and for the first time, the polished marble and gleaming fixtures felt unnervingly oppressive. She glanced at the portraits lining the walls, frozen faces of the past that had long dictated their present. We cannot lose sight of why we're here, she reminded herself silently. A few moments of uncertainty rippled through her mind, an instinctive urge to flee the spotlight of scrutiny that loomed ahead. But as Thomas pressed the button for the elevator, she felt her resolve crystallizing once again. The ride up was quiet, filled with the sound of their collective breathing, each inhale amplifying the tension brewing between them. Megan forced herself to breathe deeply, slowly. She focused on the mirror finish of the elevator doors, where her reflection stared back, a fusion of fear and fierce determination. Who was she becoming in this moment? Do you think they suspect anything? She asked, voice barely a whisper. Not yet, but if they know we're digging, things could get explosive, Thomas replied, and she could hear the undercurrent of anxiety in his tone. Megan's mind raced through worst-case scenarios. What if the wall of denial shattered, revealing not just secrets but a history laden with betrayal that could fracture their families beyond repair? Yet there was also a quiet thrill coursing through her. This was not simply about Thomas's family. It was a battle for her identity, a chance to reclaim her mother's legacy and, inadvertently, her own.
The elevator chimed, and the doors slid open to reveal a long, gleaming hallway. As they walked, she could hear the distant hum of voices, the sound of people navigating the intricate world that had both supported and stifled her for years. Remember, we're doing this for our future, not just ours, for everyone who hasn't had the courage to speak up, Thomas said, eyes searching hers intently. I know, she nodded, yet a new concern bloomed within. What if her truth was buried beneath layers of deception so thick that nothing she uncovered could produce meaningful change? What if the truth they sought was a double-edged sword, cutting into both their family's legacies and their own lives? As they turned the corner, they spotted the conference room where the board meeting was taking place. It was now or never. Megan hesitated for a moment, gathering her breath, breathing in the intensity of the moment as though she was preparing to sprint. Are you set? Thomas asked, eyes fixed firmly ahead, but she sensed his own shaky resolve undergirding the question. Let's put everything on the line, she replied, firmer than she felt, each syllable a reminder that backing down was not an option. They were both risking everything, but in this moment she recognized the truth of her own courage. They entered, and a sudden hush fell over the group. Heads turned to her, skepticism and curiosity rippling through the room as she stood at the precipice of confrontation. Megan's heart raced, fists clenched tightly at her sides. She scanned faces filled with uncertainty and arrogance, all relating to a lineage built on hidden truths. With Thomas by her side, she took a step forward. We have something to discuss, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of years spent in silence. As she began to speak, the cacophony within her mind quieted, replaced by a laser focus. The fears that had once gripped her like chains felt suddenly lighter. The truth, no matter how unflattering, was her weapon now. And it's not just about us anymore, she added, her resolve hardening. It's about all of you. The tension in the air thickened as she felt the collective gaze of the board members scrutinizing her every move. I could almost hear the doubt swirling among them, questions about her right to intrude on their sanctuary of secrets. Yet she was prepared. She wasn't just a young woman wielding a personal story. She was a force challenging the very foundations of their legacy. Let's talk about family, she said, channeling everything, vulnerabilities and strengths alike, into her words as the eyes around her widened with recognition. With their family histories intertwining into a complicated web, Megan sensed that this was just the beginning.
She was ready to face whatever truths would emerge from this gathering, ready to uncover the accidents and intentions that shaped their lives. As she launched into her narrative, the room shifted.
The air stilled as generations of whispers echoed and came to life, hinting at ruptures that would soon reverberate beyond this moment. But in the marrow of her conviction, a new fear blossomed, one not just about herself, but about the powerful forces they were ready to confront. There was no turning back, not now. What if this was only the start of a much darker revelation? The realization struck her as she looked around at the faces watching her, wondering what would unravel next. The confrontation was merely the first act in a much larger play, and as the truth surfaced, chaos inevitably followed. But as she continued, a new voice emerged within her, urging her onward with unyielding strength. Megan felt the gravity of the room settle around her like a shroud. She hadn't anticipated the sheer magnitude of silence that enveloped her words, as if the air itself had conspired to hold its breath. Each pair of eyes locked onto her with a mix of disbelief and intrigue, making her heart thrum in protest. She pressed on, that new voice within urging her to stand firm. "Why your legacies should not bind us to the past any longer," she pushed, voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside her. Warmth spread through her as she realized the strength her words held. This wasn't merely an appalling revelation, it was an awakening. Their collective history dictated their present, yet she stood there, ready to redefine it. Feeling the tremors of tension, she searched for the courage to dive deeper, ready to court controversy by questioning long-held beliefs that had surrounded their families. We need to understand the truths that have gone unspoken, the sacrifices, the struggles. It's time for all of us to face them. The landscape of her thoughts shifted and evolved. Rather than merely reciting facts and events woven into her life, she used her narrative as a tool for connection. She spoke not just about her own past, but articulated the shared burdens carried by many who felt imbued with the weight of lineage. Megan's eyes scanned the room once more, absorbing the reactions. She spotted a glimmer of recognition from some board members, a flicker of awareness that ignited her hope. Maybe she was not alone. Maybe they felt it too, the discomfort of silence, the pain entwined with their inherited legacies. But as she laid down her truth, the glances turned to more defensive postures. An older man at the far end of the table leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowing. "You have no idea what it's like to carry such a name," he challenged, the tone heavy with contempt and years of fortitude to defend his territory. "You think you can just walk in here and unravel everything we've built?" Megan's pulse quickened, and she felt the floor beneath her shift. His words were intended as a disparity, an attempt to shrink her resolve, yet they only stoked the fire. She had spent too long feeling overshadowed by others' legacies. "Perhaps I don't know what it's like," she replied, voice unfaltering. "But I do know that every family is flawed, every legacy has shadows. You think I'm here to destroy? I'm here to confront what has been buried, and that's what we owe to one another." For a moment, uncertainty flickered in the man's eyes, evidence that her conviction rattled the very foundations of the board. She saw doubt mingling with anger, confusion slowly threatening to surface from the depths of their long-held confidence. It frightened her how swiftly perceptions could shift, yet the urgency propelled her further. "Let us stop pretending we are perfect. My mother's struggles, our struggles, should be catalysts for change, not chains of suppression." Each statement resonated within her, each word becoming a building block toward her identity, a manifestation of her resolve to redefine not just her story, but their stories too. Megan quickened her pace, eager to seize the momentum, as the room shifted from skepticism to contemplation. A woman seated at the far right raised her hand, hesitating as if grappling with whether to voice her own experiences. That dissenting energy throbbed between them, ready to break into something potent. "We owe it to ourselves to have these conversations," she urged, her voice soaring with an almost primal energy. As tension morphed into a physical sensation, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was merely a prelude to an even deeper dive into vulnerability and confrontation, each twist unveiling a hidden truth that had festered too long. What consequences awaited when the next fragile bond shattered? As the murmurs of reaction enveloped her, determination washed over her anew. They were all at the precipice of self-discovery in that moment,
Each layer peeled away, unveiling something gut-wrenching yet essential. Megan knew something monumental was bubbling beneath the surface, an urgency escaping into the room. Would she be ready when the past truly collided with the present? With an almost instinctual awareness, she braced herself for the ferocity of revelations yet to come. The history she sought to untangle was becoming more demanding by the second, and as she glanced at Thomas, I could see it mirrored in his eyes, a shared resolve to brave whatever lay ahead. "Are you ready to confront the legacy?" she whispered, glancing at the room whose silence now seemed less oppressive and more electrifying. But the real question lingered in her mind. Would they be willing to uphold their end of the bargain, or crumble under the weight of their truths? Megan's voice echoed in her mind as she returned to the reality of the boardroom, a cacophony of thoughts vying for attention. She felt the air thickening, shadows of doubt stretching out before her like an impending storm. The tension shifted again as the older man leaned back, arms crossed defensively.
His gaze, however, now flickered with something deeper, a hint of contemplation, perhaps even fear. This exchange catalyzed a surge in her, propelling her further down this uncharted path. She recognized an opportunity blooming, a possibility to reshape her role within this tightly woven fabric. They were all tethered by shared histories and expectations, but here, in the very heart of conflict, lay her own potential for transformation. The woman with the raised hand finally spoke, her voice trembling but steady. "I want to share something too." Megan steeled herself, parsing through the layers of vulnerability each of them would unveil. The woman recounted her own family's struggles with addiction and the shame that had followed her for years. Megan felt the sorrow in those words wrap around her heart like a vine, thick and choking. It resonated starkly with her own battles, the pain etched into her own family legacy, the often ignored narratives that had defined her for too long. This was it, the moment to seize the shared vulnerability as a strength. "Thank you for sharing," Megan said, feeling her rawness spark as she turned her gaze to the room. "We cannot afford to dismiss these truths any longer. It is precisely in these admissions where our real power lies. This is how we rewrite our legacies." The murmur stirred again, but this time there was a softness to their discord, a willingness to engage instead of retreat into silence. Megan sensed a shift, profound and poised on the edge of something pivotal. What started as an individual confrontation had ignited waves among the others, a willingness to peel back layers, to recognize common ground, even when buried under mistrust. Then the older man spoke again, voice lower, almost contemplative. "You might make us question who we are, Megan. Are we ready for that?" The question hung heavy, mirroring her internal conflict. Was she ready to not just confront them, but to confront herself? The question of identity danced uncomfortably in her mind, stirring the memories she had longed to fade. They were forced upon her. These were not just revelations of others, but confrontations of her own familial legacy, the disappointment, the expectations that were suffocating. "Yes," she finally whispered out loud. The resolve in her answer surprised even herself. "I am ready, but what scares me the most is whether you will be prepared for what we may uncover together." The atmosphere thickened again, this time carrying an air of expectancy. Something was happening. A cycle of admission and connection was accelerating. She flicked her eyes to Thomas, whose enthusiasm shone like a beacon amid the murky uncertainty. They were not alone in this. A collective awakening was underway, and she resolved to navigate its treacherous waters. Megan's heart raced, grappling with the fact that the path ahead would not be a simple one.
Each revelation would reveal not only the strengths of those gathered, but the harsh mistakes and painful truths nestled in their shared history. And still, it was all integral to finding where they stood today, at the honorary edge of growth. The room ebbed with energy, the murmurs now more akin to whispers of agreement. Perhaps they all had unspoken wounds, tethered by invisible strings of legacy. Was this the tipping point they needed? Would the walls they built around their identities crumble in the face of vulnerability? As Megan contemplated the enormity of her next steps, her resolve solidified. She belonged not only to her past, but to the path ahead, one she must carve illuminated by the truth that awaited. In a world where revelations lived in shadows, she felt ready to step into the light. And with those thoughts spiraling, a new question emerged in her mind. How many more hidden truths lay within each of them, waiting to be unearthed? Would the conversation continue to peel back layers, or would their candor fracture under the light they dared to shine?
Megan stood in front of the boardroom, adrenaline surging through her. After the whirlwind of revelations and heartfelt discussions, she could feel the tide shifting, not just within the room, but within herself. Each shared story had chipped away at the long-standing barriers, forging connections born from vulnerability and awakening. Her heart thumped steadily, riding the crest of transformation. The conversations had brought weight to her words and purpose to her actions. It was no longer merely about exposing the truth of Thomas's family legacy or reclaiming her mother's story. It was about championing the collective healing they all needed to confront. As the board members exchanged glances, the initial resistance melted. The older man who had been so skeptical now wore a contemplative expression, a sign she dared to hope heralded acceptance. "Perhaps it is time to reassess our priorities," he finally spoke, his voice softened yet assertive. Megan felt the corners of her mouth lift, the first inklings of pride threading through her. Potential resolution loomed, and the air buzzed with uncharted possibilities. This was the moment where her individual courage was magnified by collective strength, a breakthrough that could spark a ripple effect in their intertwined lives. "We owe it to ourselves and to everyone we've affected to discuss where we go from here," she urged, emboldened by the revelation that change began with honest dialogue. "The past has shaped us, but it doesn't have to define our futures." Each word resonated, and as her gaze swept across the room, she noticed nods of agreement, eyebrows raised with appreciation. They weren't just listeners anymore. They were participants in a shared vision. It felt surreal, a symphony of understanding pushing back against years of silence.
One of the women seated to her right tentatively raised her hand again, this time not for defense, but for contribution. "I have seen the toll of our decisions. Counting profits over people has cost pain, not only in our communities, but within our families. It is clear that change starts with us." Megan could only marvel at the transformation unfolding. It was a rallying cry for those who had once carried their legacies like burdens, the beginnings of a movement determined to infuse awareness and accountability into their actions. The conversations flowed, and with each contribution, Megan felt her own evolution crystallizing. She had gone from a shy waitress caught beneath the weight of expectation to an empowered voice among giants, determined to reclaim not only her narrative, but to instigate systemic change. Feeling the tide of resolve glaze over her, she turned to Thomas, who sat at her side, a mixture of pride and elation flickering in his eyes. "You did this," he whispered, awe radiating. She met his gaze, realizing they were both navigating uncharted waters together. "We did this," she replied, the weight of camaraderie surging through her. In this moment, all the uncertainty they had faced and the risk they undertook to align their paths faded into the background. They were not defined by their families, but rather by their willingness to confront and rewrite those narratives. As the meeting continued, plans for outreach began to take shape, not just as a company initiative, but as a personal manifesto for many. They crafted goals centered around community support and transparency, commitment to legislation that would safeguard their local economy from corporate overreach, a sharp contrast to the past built on disregard. Megan's spirits soared as she felt solid ground beneath her feet. She was no longer just a factory of fleeting memories, but a true changemaker, unearthing the foundations of her familial legacy. As the meeting drew to a close, the board members stood, a tentative but palpable unity formed among them. They had brushed away the shrouds of silence that had cloaked their histories, and as applause rippled through the room, Megan finally felt what it meant to triumph as individuals and collectively. In the aftermath, Thomas turned to her, his voice a passionate whisper against the fading applause. "I want you to help me drive our family's vision forward. Let's make sure the stories we tell shape the legacy we leave." The future stretched impossibly wide before her, filled with promise. She could envision herself stepping beyond the confines of the diner, seeking a career not just for status but for purpose, impacting lives through her aspirations. The recognition and competence she had fought for ignited the ambitious spark she had always held deep within and transformed her dream of attending college into a tangible reality. "I'm ready to embrace everything that comes next," Megan declared, fueled by the empowerment stemming from her choices. Thomas's smile mirrored her excitement, the partnership they had ignited forever altering their destinies. As they stepped into the bustling streets outside, the weight of the world had shifted from burdensome to bold. Together, they would not only transcend their families' pasts, but also build a narrative laced with compassion, growth, and unwavering commitment to justice. "Are you excited?" Thomas asked, glancing at her as they walked side by side. "More than ever," Megan replied, a newfound confidence radiating through her. She could feel the echoes of her mother's voice, weaving through her. "You are more than the layers of your story. You are the author." With each step, she felt lighter, liberated from doubt and into a bright horizon. Their journey, once clouded in uncertainty, now shimmered with a path forged in integrity, hope, and unity. This was their moment, both of them transformed from the inside out. And as they laughed and planned, the path ahead unfolded like the dawning of a new era, one forged by their individual journeys toward redemption, and the undeniable truth that there is immeasurable strength found in embracing one's past as they forge toward a remarkable future. Now they would face the world unapologetically, and together redefine not only who they were, but who they aspired to be. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to support this channel. It makes a difference. Comment below to share your reactions and speculate on what happens next. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show your support.